it says, they are your people whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand. Now, this question, whose people are they anyway, has everything to do with the outcome of this particular scene between God, Moses, and the people. I am under the persuasion that the Lord never really disowns the people. Instead, he was locating the whereabouts of Moses' thinking. You see, if it had been determined that the people truly belonged to Moses, they would have been destroyed in that instant. But because it is revealed that they belong to the Lord, they were not consumed. Somebody should have got a rise out of that one. Come on, because all of us should have been consumed. My sisters and brothers, this was ultimately a test of Moses' leadership. And because he had a mind to pray, Moses passed the test. He goes through the open door that God leads for him to intercede and to pray for the people. You know, sometimes the Lord allows us to see the worst in people just to see how we will respond. And to see if we will get judgmental and point fingers and put folk down and separate ourselves from them. Or if we will bend our knees and make a connection with them by lifting them up through prayer. You know, sometimes God lets you see the weakness in other folk, not so you can talk about them, not so you can ostracize them, but does it so you can pray for them. Somebody ought to hear what I'm trying to say. I did tell you that Moses passed the test. He stepped in between God and the people, and he prays for them. Y'all, God has given us an invitation, you and me, to step between him and those who are going in the wrong direction. Did you get the invitation? You might want to check the mailbox of your heart when you get home, because God has sent you the invitation. He said, if my people, he didn't say everybody, he said, if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, then will I heal the land. My brothers and sisters, Moses prayed, but he had every reason not to pray. First of all, God was angry with the people, and that by itself was reason enough not to pray. Yes, whenever God's angry, this text, it seems like that's a final situation. So he had every reason not to pray, which first of all was because God had already let him know how angry he was with the people. He also could have become a self-serving leader whose only concern was himself and what the Lord could do for him. Remember, God tested Moses and said, you know what, I'll wipe all of them out and I'll make a nation out of you. Even though the people, y'all, had gotten under Moses' skin as well as God's, Moses does not let how he feels determine what he prays or what he doesn't pray for the people. I mean, if you're going to pray for the individuals who need it most, you can't be thin-skinned. You must stay focused on what they need more than on how you feel. Am I right about it? That's the only way doctors and nurses can do their jobs effectively. Because if they get caught up in how they feel about a patient, especially a patient that just comes in off the cuff complaining and talking about the doctor not doing the job, it makes it hard for the doctor to do what he's there to do. That's how it is for waiters and waitresses. I dare you to go to a restaurant and complain and talk about your waiter, talk about your waitress. It's hard for them to do their jobs. Am I right about it? Because of the way we feel about them sometimes. And thank God Moses had a mind to pray. What Moses must have been aware of is that even though God seems to have had his mind made up as to what he would do to the people through prayer, his mind could still be changed. When Moses gets done praying, y'all, we're told that God relented from the harm he said he would do to the people. say that God has falsely accused the people of doing wrong. Not once does he tell God the people don't deserve the justice that God desires to dispense. Not once does Moses make excuses for the people's behavior and their misbehaving. And not once does Moses make the prayer about him and what all he has done for God on the people's behalf. That's because a mind-changing prayer focuses on who God is, what God's will is, and what his word says. That's how Moses prayed. You see, too many times our prayers get hindered, not because we don't need what we're praying for, but because we have not convinced the Lord that we know who he is, and we know what his will is, and we know what his word says. Can I talk about a mind-changing prayer? Moses demonstrated the kind of leader he was, because even when God's mind seemed to have been made up and the people's destiny had been decided, Moses still prays. Moses' test consisted of him being willing to take advantage of the opportunity to save the people when it presented itself. Moses had been with God long enough to understand that even when we deserve the worst, that God is hesitant to give us what we deserve. I keep trying to tell before it came that with God, mercy is always the rule, and justice is the exception to the rule. But when you get to the world, justice is the rule, and mercy is the exception to the rule. I don't know how you feel about it, but when I get to God, I don't need justice. But what I need is some mercy. Somebody to feel me up in here. Up in here. I need somebody to feel what I'm trying to say. Moses' test consisted of him praying to God. And God is hesitant, y'all, always to give us what we deserve. And the only way to curb, y'all, what we deserve is through prayer. Did you hear what I said? The only way to curb what we really deserve is through prayer. But not just any prayer. There has to be a mind-changing prayer. A prayer that grasps who God is, what his will is, and what his word says. Church, if there was one thing you could do, come on, I'm talking to you now. If there was one thing you could do to change God's mind toward your direction, the question is, would you do it? I mean, you can change God's mind for the better for your situation. The question is, would you do it? I mean, we don't always know what God's mind is thinking in every situation, but if you can set the atmosphere so that God could move in your favor, the question is, would you do it? I mean, if you can get God to move in your favor when it comes to your family, would you do it? If you can get God to move in your favor when it comes to your marriage, the question is, will you do it? If you can get God to move in your favor when it comes to your health, the question is, would you do it? If you can get God to move in your favor when it comes to your living conditions, the question is, will you do it? Somebody let your neighbor say, baby, he's talking to you. We are told, my brothers and sisters, that after the Lord expresses his plans of destruction for the people, that Moses pleaded with the Lord his God. And the word plead means to be rubbed, to be warned. In other words, Moses kept on praying, and he kept on praying until he wore a spot out where he prayed at. Somebody ought to feel me. I need somebody to understand